The concept of money is entirely arbitrary. Whether it be a credit card or a $100 bill, it only has as much value as we assign to it. Scouring through the annals of history, one finds that trade has been the cornerstone of human civilization. We see it in the ancient societies of Egypt, China, India, Sumer, and others. Before civilization bloomed in Mesopotamia, life was primarily an individual or tribal endeavor. The hunter-gatherer culture was predicated on the survival of the fittest. People had never realized that working together could minimize their losses and help them flourish. By bringing different groups of people with varying talents and abilities, humanity was able to leave the isolation and boredom of primitive times behind. We can even see this specialization in our society today. In manufacturing and service industries, every link in the chain performs a specialized task that helps the whole process. This was a critical revelation from the Mesopotamians, who were responsible for creating the first cities known to humankind. Since then, trade has become one of the most widely adopted professions. Whenever one reads the tales of antiquity or the Middle Ages, one is bound to come across images of merchants and traders selling goods in the markets. However, commerce has changed drastically since those times, and if we go further back, we witness an entirely different system. However, it should be noted that the current understanding of the history of money is mainly based on conjecture and logical inference. The earliest form of trade happened in the most rudimentary fashion, as it was based on the intrinsic value of the goods. In other words, valuable goods were the money. The value of these goods was realized by their intended use, not by an arbitrary assignment. This medium of exchange, known as the barter system, continued for a long time. People would trade food like salt, wheat, and rice for other commodities like utensils, metals, and weapons. This allowed the most prevalent human occupation since the Neolithic era, agriculture, to connect with commerce. The barter system had its fair share of flaws. For one, there was no standardized way of valuing goods, meaning that even the simplest trades took a long time. The barter exchange was a viable system for as long as it lasted. Due to the lack of ancient records, it is not entirely clear when people started adopting the currency systems. The economic systems of ancient history are hard to understand because some of them predate writing systems. For example, we know that a monetary system existed around 5,000 years ago in Mesopotamia. We can find instances of recorded ledgers from these times. The idea of assigning specific values to tokens gained traction over time. And although some people would immediately think of old metallic coins, other tokens did exist before them. Archaeologists found clay tokens in ancient Babylon, Egypt, China, and India. Palaces would use these tokens to assign values against stored goods. Other currencies existed in the form of animal skins, weapons, and salt. We know that before 2000 BCE, people were using metal as money in Babylon. However, by this time, metals did not exist in a certified form of coinage. The system of metallic coins would begin to emerge in the different parts of the world around the 7th century BCE. It is known that coins were created in China around this time. In a recent expedition, archaeologists uncovered a coin minting site in Guanghuang in Henan Province. This location, dating back to approximately 640 BCE, is the oldest known minting site for standardized metal coinage. Coins also began appearing in India around this time. If we look at Asia Minor, Alyattes of Lydia is believed to have minted an official currency around 600 BCE. The introduction of a standardized currency helped Lydia become one of the wealthiest empires in the region. The Greek historian Herodotus recalls this story while referring to a Greek poet from the 6th century BCE, Xenophanes. How did this system of trading metals start? We have to realize that this probably happened during the Copper and Bronze Ages. As people began to use metals increasingly, they slowly shifted from a barter-based system to a monetary system. Another critical factor in the realization of metal currency was the increase in trade. Since people were now trading barley, feathers, honey, and other commodities, the need for money became apparent. Then there was the evident variation that emerged with innovation. Earlier, less evolved forms of humans had existed for far too long, but only when people started to form urban civilizations and take on collective ventures did we see a rise in creativity and innovation. Large urban populations are ubiquitous and hardly seem worth marveling at these days. We are so used to large groups of people working together that we fail to notice how hard it is to survive alone. Metals became common over time, both as materials and as currencies. Since metals had intrinsic material value, people were not hesitant to use them within their communities. If foreign cultures had no use for said currencies, they could still sell the metal coins. Metals like silver, copper, and gold could be used to make the coins, and to a trained individual, it was easy to ascertain their composition. Over time, gold and silver coins became quite common in Europe and were used for several centuries. The proof is in the pudding. Some Eurasian languages use the words money and silver interchangeably. Like the previous system, this one had its pros and cons. Tricky individuals were adept at manipulating the coins to where they did not have the desired amount of metal. Different techniques like clipping the edges or plating an ordinary material with metal were common. The other issue was the standard market rates varied in different regions. So gold's exchange rate against silver could differ from region to region, depending on the import and export of other metals. Like the basic rate of supply and demand in modern economics, the availability of any metal could have significant implications for the market. The lack of standards was another issue when carrying coins across the globe. The major change in Europe came in the Middle Ages, when coins went from being a unit of weight to a unit of value. India and Asia Minor were the progenitors of the age of true coinage, which eventually reached other areas of the globe. Let's go back a bit further and focus our attention on the Islamic Golden Age. We find that the medieval Islamic world introduced many modern concepts of economics. Ideas like checks, transactional and savings accounts, exchange rates, bank loans, deposits, and transfer of debt and credit can be traced back here. The Mediterranean trade, especially around Italy, also used bills of exchange, which can be called an earlier form of credit. Since traveling with money was considered dangerous, the practices helped alleviate the fear of getting robbed. Until that time, the Europeans were using other symbolic forms as stores of value. In the 12th century, the English introduced another form of exchange bills. Since paper had been invented in China and was rare in the West, the British monarchy developed a system of using tally sticks. While all this was happening in Eurasia and North Africa, China had already begun printing paper bills called jiaozi. Paper money was introduced in the Song dynasty in the 11th century CE. Merchant receipts during the Tang dynasty predate this event, but they were not strictly money. After its emergence in China, representative money kept popping up in different parts of the world. From the 14th century, we find examples of imperial currencies in the Indian subcontinent. The rupiah, known as the rupee in modern times, was introduced by Sher Shah Suri in the 16th century, and taka, the Bangladeshi currency, was introduced by the Delhi Sultanate in the 14th century. In the High and Late Middle Ages, Europeans began to travel the world and discovered new routes. Marco Polo comes to mind. So by the 13th century, Europeans had witnessed this phenomenon abroad and had started implementing it back home. Over time, currencies became regulated and governments started to exert more control. The first European banknotes were issued in the 17th century, and the practice caught on. Even in America, banknotes remained in use until the 19th century. Since this money was representative of gold or silver, the bank was supposed to exchange it upon the customer's request. In the 1970s, in an event known as the Nixon shock, the American president destroyed the system of gold conversion. Since the money was no longer valued against gold reserves, the price of the dollar was determined by the market. A few decades later, credit and debit cards started to gain traction. While payment cards have been around since the late 20th century, they were widely adopted in the 21st century. In recent years, technology has been moving at an abrupt pace, and it would be unwise to think that commerce would not follow this trend. Digital currencies and mobile payments are becoming ubiquitous, and services like Google Pay and Apple Pay work on this model. Most transactions around the world today are conducted digitally. Recently, we have seen another silent revolution in e-commerce and finance. Cryptocurrency is an ever-growing phenomenon. Bitcoin, the first cryptocurrency, was proposed in 2008, but it has taken a long time to achieve a mainstream exposure. A cryptocurrency is a form of digital cash, an electronic currency that can be used in the same way as regular cash. These currencies can be used to buy services and products. The technology has witnessed a boom because it has robust cryptography that prevents manipulation. But the fundamental revolutionary aspect of cryptocurrencies lies not in the currency itself, but in the underlying mechanism of how the records are kept. That is where blockchain comes in. Blockchain is a technology for storing records, but what differentiates it from a traditional database is that it is entirely decentralized. The decentralized blockchains are immutable. For example, the data cannot be deleted. Once it is entered, a copy of the record is made. The decentralization helps ensure that the control is not concentrated on a single or a small group of people. Instead, everyone who uses the technology retains control collectively. Technological think tanks around the world are advocating for the use of cryptocurrencies. Some have even termed it the beginning of the fourth industrial revolution. From trading a dozen chickens for a few building materials to tapping a gadget for digital transactions, we have come a long way. Money has been a critical aspect of human life for at least a few millennia. Most of us might not be trading animal skins to get goods today, but our needs are not that different from our ancestors. However, the form of the economic system has shifted on its head. As long as money exists, it will continue to change and evolve. We hope you enjoyed this video on the evolution of money. If you did, please hit the like button and subscribe for more videos like this. Also, grab your free Mythology Bundle ebook while it's still available. The link is in the description.